Wow, it finally got a PC release, also known as a Steam release. Industries of Titan comes now to Steam, an entire year later, so maybe it's worth buying now? I've actually been following this game on Steam for quite a while and had no idea that it had come out on Epic Game Store almost a year ago. Anyways, Industries of Titan is a pretty unique take on the city builder genre, tries to innovate in some ways and whatnot. The first thing you'll notice is the voxel art graphics. This was totally unexpected. From all the promotional footage, other people's gameplay, it's actually kind of hard to tell that the graphics are indeed voxel based. You would have to look pretty close to really notice. But it overall looks pretty great. None of the textures are relatively low res or anything like that, so they don't stick out. The squares on the voxels are not too big or too small, so they kind of just work, TM. It doesn't hurt the look any, it looks fine. Industries of Titan also uses very good colors. Everything is relatively vibrant, colorful, neon signs of the future are really bright as you would expect. All of this works well with the weather system as well. The rain in particular looks amazing. A lot of people always harp on this. It's quite good. I really didn't expect the voxel graphics though, seeing as pretty much every game that does voxel graphics look bad. You may also expect this to be a bad thing about Titan. But I don't really think so. Again, it looks pretty good. It actually kind of reminds me a little bit of the Factorio sprites, but again, Factorio used sprites, this doesn't. Now onto sound. Not a ton of ambient sounds or music really play in general, however the soundtrack is relatively great. They also added a new jukebox so you can remove or loop the tracks you like. Maybe pick one and play it on loop over and over. It's unsurprising to find that the soundtrack is great when you find out who the composer is. He's behind the Binding of Isaac games, the Super Meat Boy games, and the Crypt of the Necrodancer. Now, the sound effects are kind of rough though. There really isn't many in general, and most of the ones that exist are kind of stock sounding, like lasers sound exactly as you would imagine they would. Now, the sound mixing itself is overall fine. Nothing sounds low quality or out of place for the most part. Followed up by the voice acting. The voice acting is great. The advisors that you get later on are all fully voiced by relatively good voice actors. Their dialogues are pretty well written too.
Decided to monetize your citizens. Excellent. They're going to need jobs. Lots of jobs. When citizens work, they earn credits. We harvest those credits by exposing them to high click-through video advertisements. To begin, construct monetization stations inside your headquarters or factories. Once those devices are built, our citizens can start enjoying some fresh, exciting adverts.
Reminds me a lot of the SimCity advisors. You can't cut back on funding. You'll regret this. Gameplay. Starting out, you need 2 resources, basically to do everything. You use minerals and isotopes. These are gathered in a few different ways, and you build everything out of these. Early on, salvaging old dead world buildings that were abandoned, trade ships that come by every now and then, and later on from mineral or isotope mines that are actually huge nodes of material to gather. The salvaging of the old dead world involves sending workers out to the ruins of the previous settlers to salvage for resources or artifacts. Some buildings don't have anything at all, but you could survey them ahead of time to choose which ones you would like to gather from. The mines are just big nodes that you build a mine next to, it links to it, and it provides you the resource. The next thing you will need is fuel, which is from the resource zethane gas. The world is so damaged that the core of the planet is actually leaking this into the atmosphere. However, this is not an infinite amount of resource here. If you gather too much in a concentrated area, you'll end up drying it up. This can bring your entire city to a crawl as your power plants don't have fuel to run. There are things like sinkholes and cracks in Titan that leak it in extreme quantities. You can gather from these, and a lot of the times, these are far more supply than what most people will need. This is your primary method of generating power, so if it's poorly managed, you may end up failing completely and having to restart. I did that. I gathered it from just randomly in the air, not knowing about the cracks or the sinkholes, and you can actually dry it up to 0. Factories are large-scale buildings that you build next. In some cases, they'll have multiple floors even, and have their own customizable interiors. You can have an entire subscreen of little Factorio-esque factories inside of each one. It's almost like that one mod for Factorio that I can't pronounce the word. Citizen and worker residences, refineries to produce higher tiers of minerals and isotopes, all inside of these factories, fully customizable. Now, producing the higher tier minerals and isotopes is actually really important. They offer far more buildable material, but at almost the same actual base material cost. Basically, it creates free materials and, I guess, a cost-saving metric. I'm not really sure. Now, one downside to these interiors is you can't move or copy stuff. No blueprints or anything like that. So if you wanted to have, for example, multiple floors to be exactly the same, you'd have to do them each one by hand. You also can't, like, pick them up and move them, whereas in Factorio you could. And Factorio also had a blueprint system specifically for this. Titan would hugely benefit from this. They should just straight rip off Factorio's blueprint. Anyways, there's no conveyor belts, so getting machines to line up correctly is really not space conscious whatsoever. You also have to have citizens watch high click-through ads in these factories to make credits. They're just little kiosks that they stand in and watch ads. The future sounds great. Now, credits in general are kind of pointless though. You could get, with not much investment, more than you will ever need. Pretty much all they're for is paying for your workers, which, as long as you have more citizens and workers, you'll never have a problem. And buying blueprints, which is all just one-time cost. Now, this is basically all citizens do, is watch ads, go to sleep, watch ads, go to sleep. And the workers are the ones who actually, like, build stuff and stuff like that. Now there's a council, and this council is the council of the company you work for. Over time you gain influence with them, and this is primarily used to unlock new tiles. This is very slow, especially in the early game, and you really need a lot of tiles. Influence only comes at about 1 per second, and takes sometimes 20 to unlock one tile. Some of the bigger ones are 40. So a lot of the time you end up just sitting there waiting the last few points out so you can continue. Later on, a building becomes available to speed this up, but by then you don't need it as bad, and it doesn't even give you that much. It's like another 1 per second. So it's better, but not great. You can also use this influence to trade with the council, but the rates are absolutely terrible. They rip you off. Basically, this is a failsafe, so you can't back yourself into a corner and not have anything to gather from. That's my guess.
So long!
From time to time, though, trade ships will fly by and have materials and citizens for sale on a completely different building. You can actually use the same influence to buy whatever's on the ship. This should really have been used more often, and it should have been credits, because pretty much credits don't really have a reason to exist. Every now and then, if you choose to play the stock mode, rebels will attack you. You defend yourself by using huge defense guns and later ships. You can also fight back and damage their towns with those same ships. Combat in Titan is actually really shallow though. It's very slow paced and is more of a rock'em sock'em robot style. Rebels in general are overall kind of pointless. The turrets and defenses are so expensive, and sometimes you lose a building because the turret's barely out of range. Pollution becomes a really big problem later. It really spreads like wildfire, and there's a building that actually cleans the air and it helps. But it's not a perfect fix. Funnily enough, you could build a big-ass fan to just blow the pollution away in a different direction than we are. This also goes for zethane gas. For the most part, gameplay involves city building, trying to balance the needs of the city overall, materials, power, waste disposal. Waste disposal in particular is extremely annoying to handle. It's way too abundant. It can really overwhelm your workers way too quickly. A lot of the gameplay there really is not a whole lot. It's basically a city builder, but you have a lot more downtime, seeing as it's not as engaging as others, and you have to wait several minutes to get materials to build one thing, seeing as all the structures are incredibly expensive. They really could go with cutting everything in half, and the game would be much faster paced and a lot funner to play. There'd be a lot less downtime. Now, for the story, there's not a whole lot going on. Basically, you're on the moon around Saturn, Titan. Other people tried to colonize it, failed, and you really don't know why. It'd be neat to have a little bit more story aspects here, maybe determining what happened in the end. The performance of the game engine also slows down quite a bit in the late game. I get it, there's a lot of on-screen rendering happening. There's also a lot of AI pathfinding, but the performance will drop from 60, 70 FPS to like 20. Industries of Titan is a very interesting game. They really tried to make something different here, and they made several attempts at innovation, but at this time it is now worth buying it to play it. Let me explain. They have a huge roadmap showing their plans, and at this point in time you could believe that these roadmaps will probably be accurate. They've already had 3 huge updates that added quite a bit of content to the game. So if you're interested in more of a buy now, play later, Titan's a pretty good option. This will support the developer and hopefully they'll keep going with it. Right now, Titan's on sale for $24, which for an indie game is a very fair price. Factorio's $30. I would imagine though, in about a year's time, this game will be completely unrecognizable to its current state. As always, thank you for watching the video. If you liked the video, like it. If you disliked it, go ahead. As is before, I'm still progressing through my what to do here and there, and if you have any feedback, do leave a comment. I read all of them.